All right. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. I want to thank everybody for actually staying so late into the conference. I was a little concerned how many people would be left. Little did I know that I would still have Daniel Yergin in the room and the governor for this last panel. But again, thank you. I'd like to do a brief introduction of the Railbelt utilities. Immediately to my right is Carrie Ann Baker. She's the Director of Member Relations for Homer Electric Association. And then I have Arthur Miller, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Chugach Electric. And then Julie Esty, who is the Senior Director of External Affairs and Strategic Initiatives at Matanuska Electric. And then our further northern utility is we have John Burns, who is the CEO of Golden Valley Electric. So I want to thank everybody for making the effort. We won't name who, but somebody has a tan who's been spending some time in Europe and just got back for the conference, and we do appreciate that. A couple of things about the Alaska Energy Authority. We're a public corporation, and our mission is to lower the cost of energy on the rail belt. But we do that looking through Alaska's energy portfolio, and it's increasingly more important for us to look at resilience, reliability, and redundancy to do that. It was just a year ago that we stood on the same stage at the same conference, and we told everybody in the room and the governor we were going to make the largest investment in the rail belt since the building of Bradley Lake 32 years ago. And with that, in December, we closed on a bond for $166 million. 35% of that money is dedicated for batteries or a BESS system, and the other 65% to increase and to improve and rebuild the transmission system. It's not all the money it's going to take, but it is a huge difference. And actually this summer, if you drive by Kenai and you go through Cooper Landing, you'll see lines that were the old 69 kV line that it was actually laying on the ground. They were not energized, but we have pulled those poles and we've cleared that right away for that expansion. And we're working on engineering and procurement to determine what the cost will be for this total transformation of the rail belt. So from a year ago today to actually having people in the field today clearing that right away, I think is a huge accomplishment for the utilities. And I want to thank the utilities for that. And the best thing about it is it does not cost the ratepayers any additional funding, nor does it cost the state of Alaska any funding. It was with the excess payments from Bradley when the bonds were paid off, and it was a successful partnership with all the utilities. Thank you. AEA owns Bradley Lake Hydro Project, which is the largest hydro project in Alaska, and it's located outside of Homer, and with that, we manage that together with the Railbelt utilities. For example, Golden Valley receives 17% of the power from Bradley. Chugach Electric, 56% of the power. And MEA, I believe about 12, and then Homer. And then actually the city of Seward, who is the empty chair, is 1% of the power they see from Bradley. We've done a lot to improve that. It's the lowest cost energy on the rail belt at 4 cents a kilowatt. And following the successful completion of what we call the Battle Creek Diversion Project in 2020, where we diverted water into Bradley Lake to increase the capacity, and that increased the Bradley output by about 10%. AEA is now studying, working with utilities, and thanks to the legislature, who funded $5 million, to look at what we call a Dixon diversion, which is just 5 miles away on the same footprint as Bradley, to divert water over to Bradley, which could increase the capacity of Bradley by 50%, taking it not from 10% on the rail belt, but 15% on the rail belt. And with that, we need to upgrade the transmission lines, and that's where we come in with a $166 million commitment to look at that. But where Bradley Lake is 54,000 homes we electrify, the Dixon diversion would add 30,000 homes to that. So 84,000 homes on the rail belt would be electrified with this one project. And I think really with that, I'd like to turn it over to Carrie Ann to kind of explain the rail belt a little bit and what we're doing.
Thank you, Curtis. You know, one of the interesting things that has been very nice to be a part of is working together with these colleagues on the Railbelt and under Curtis's leadership and under the leadership of the governor, because it's really going to take each and every one of us working together in order to solve some of these problems. So the Railbelt is a little bit different than some of the places in the lower 48. I know on the map, for those of you that are from out of state, it looks small, but we are the largest state, and if you look at the Railbelt, we stretch from an area of West Virginia all the way up to Maine. We're 4 member-owned cooperatives and 1 municipal utility. We provide about 75% of all electric energy to the state of Alaska, just shy to about 550,000 people. Our system is powered through one long extension cord, about 700 miles, that starts across the bay from South Kachemak Bay, which is where Homer is, and then stretches all the way down, or all the way up to where John is in Fairbanks. If you can go ahead and just flip to the next slide, please. So as you can see, this is a very diverse area. It's also unique in that we don't have the same kind of redundancies that would be found in a lower 48 system. We literally have one extension line that goes from across South Kachemak Bay all the way up to Fairbanks, but it's not even at the same capacity. We have various lines at 230, 115, 69. So by the time we get our power, that a lot of it produced by hydro and natural gas, all the way up the grid, there's a lot of line losses and some inefficiencies that are lost. We're an isolated grid. We're not connected to Canada. And we're also unique in the sense that we're vertically aligned. We have both distribution and generation. You know, we're going through a lot of different kind of changes, and I think I would ask Arthur to speak to the changes that we're seeing on the Railbelt.
Thank you, Carrie Ann. Well, let me first start out by saying the electric Railbelt utilities have relied on natural gas to meet our generation requirements for decades. And the gas is used not only for power our generation, between 80 and 85% on our system, but also for heating purposes from NSTAR Natural Gas, which provides gas to residents and businesses throughout South Central Alaska. Earlier this year, the Alaska Department of Natural Resources issued their gas reserves report for the entire Cook Inlet Basin. This chart shows the demand for natural gas versus the supply of natural gas on a projected basis. Beginning in 2027, the demand for natural gas exceeds the supply of that gas. And this assumes, additionally assumes that 15 new wells will be drilled annually throughout the planning horizon. This is a major issue facing the utilities throughout South Central Alaska and for Golden Valley Electric Association as well. Even though they're not interconnected with the gas line, they make purchases of power from the utilities in South Central Alaska. The fundamental question that we are facing as utilities is how do we fill the gap between the supply of gas and demand for gas as we go forward. And it really involves a multifaceted solution that we are working hard on. I'm going to pass it over to Julie Esty at Matanuska Electric Association, and she's going to walk through some of the options that we're evaluating right now.
Hi, everyone. Julie Esty. It's great to see everybody still here. As Curtis said, thanks for hanging around. You know, as Arthur said, we're reaching a critical point for the state of Alaska and for the Railbelt. But with, of course, every challenge comes a lot of opportunities. And sitting in this room, listening to some of you all talk and some of the experts that have come in from the lower 48 and really the world, it's been really exciting to hear about all of those opportunities. And with all those opportunities come trade-offs. And so now, as Arthur mentioned, we're in the process of figuring out how do we fill that gap? What of this long laundry list of opportunities is the best fit for Alaska? And how do we pace that change in a way that has the least unintended consequences and the fewest trade-offs. Because as we look at our options, they all have trade-offs. And we need to have some very candid discussions about those trade-offs as a state and figure out how to mitigate those and how to move forward with the best way possible with our eyes wide open. And I love that I can look around and see this sea of faces of legislators, of folks from the university, of independent power producers, who is our coalition to make that happen. And it's really with that collaboration that we're going to make it work. So one of the first things, of course, we're trying to figure out is what are our options with natural gas? We need firm power here in the state, and so as we look at natural gas, that is a place that we can use to continue this transition and bridge to the next generation. So what are our options? How much does it cost? Do each of those options cost? And what are the opportunity costs for going with any of those different options? What are we missing out on if we choose this solution? We're also looking at a whole suite of clean energy, and really where we are coming from, and this is something I've heard from all the experts, is diversification is the key, and that really is true for us as well, because resilience is what it comes down to for each of us. That's what we're responsible for with our ratepayers. I mean, in the last couple of years, I've had an avalanche, I've had an earthquake, I've had a couple of blizzards, I've had 120-mile-an-hour winds. So we also need to have a system and generation options that our members, our Alaskans, can count on. So we also have to figure out what our system can handle. As Carrie Ann mentioned, the system is different than the lower 48. We're a long extension cord. We have limits. And so we are still trying to figure out what can our system do? What can it do? And what can we invest in to make some of these opportunities happen? A big part of that is transmission. Storage is another opportunity that we're all gathering around as well. And so it's an exciting time. Again, we look forward to working with the folks in this room, both inside and outside of Alaska, to see what solutions we can bring to bear. John?
Great, thanks. Thanks very much, Julie. You know, where we end up really is what are the Railbelt goals? What's the Railbelt vision for clean energy? And this next slide really kind of summarizes it. There really are 5 principal objectives. The first is diversification of generation sources. You've heard, from a variety of opportunities that are present during the conference today. Added to that, though, is expanding transmission capacity and infrastructure. It's critical. Fundamentally, what we want to achieve is getting the lowest cost electron from wherever it is generated to wherever it is needed, whenever it is needed. All right, so it's diversification of generation and expansion of transmission in order to really create an electron highway, if you would. The second is what we call a sensible, and I would say a pragmatic and an intelligent, deliberate approach with the focus on impacts, rates, and reliability. The bottom line is everybody that you see up here has a fiduciary obligation to ensure that we have reliable, safe, reasonably priced electricity. Okay, when somebody turns on the electric switch, it's imperative that there be energy to generate the electricity. So we've got to take a thoughtful approach, and many of us here have board members that are in the audience today who are grappling with that issue. It's easy to say we want to go from A to Z, but you've got to go through the alphabet to get there. And so, it's taking a sensible approach to it. And the third is, and this goes to the core of it. It's fostering and encouraging collaboration across all sorts of disciplines, not just within the management of the utilities, but the board levels as well. It's at the state. We're very fortunate to have a governor who's committed to ensuring the energy future of Alaska. It's the legislature, it's the agencies, other stakeholders. It's a collaborative process that spans the whole spectrum. And I would add to that, though, that we also have to have a sustained commitment to focusing and delivering on the vision. And it's a sustained commitment to the best interest of the Railbelt as a whole. Okay, no longer can we afford to ask, what's in it for me? The question has to be, how can we work together to ensure that the best interests of the Railbelt as a whole are achieved. And I'm very pleased to say that that the Railbelt, coupled with AEA and the state as a whole, are really focused on collaborating, looking at the Railbelt. Also, you heard from the lunch speaker, Daniel Jurgen, the importance of long-term energy security. Okay, we have to be deliberate in how we approach things because the energy security is critical. And finally, maximizing carbon reductions. And again, we can't achieve that without working collaboratively. We can put a 40-megawatt wind project in Golden Valley system. We can handle it. We maximize benefits, the economies of scale, maximizing carbon reduction by putting a 150-megawatt project that then gets transmitted throughout the Railbelt. That's how we achieve real transformative change. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. I think with that, Arthur, why don't you take us kind of down the path of what Chugach Electric is looking at for diversification and going down to carbon reduction, as each one of the utilities, for various reasons, have different goals and they have different technologies available to them within their region. So maybe tell us a little bit about what Chugach is doing, and then we'll follow it up with Julie.
Thank you, Curtis. Well, first of all, reducing carbon and diversifying our generation portfolio are key priorities for Chugach Electric. And last year, the Chugach Board of Directors established decarbonization goals to reduce our decarbonization footprint by at least 35% by 2030 and by at least 50% by 2040. Our generation portfolio today is approximately 82% natural gas, 15% hydroelectric, and 3% wind. And also I want to look at this or make a comment about the term diversification. I think we're looking at diversification away from reliance on natural gas in relationship to where we stand today. I think it's fair to say that if we had significant additional hydro generation resources on our system, we would be fine with not having diversification. Those hydro generation resources, for example, with Bradley Lake, that provides storage. It provides the ability for us to regulate intermittent renewable generation. And those are long-term projects. Bradley Lake will be a 100-year project, at least, through time. Significant benefit to the Railbelt, not just for today, but for decades to come. Bradley Lake and even Cooper Lake and Chugach's hydroelectric facility and the shared facility with Chugach and Matanuska Electric, and right now with the municipality of Anchorage, among the cheapest power in the Railbelt by a significant amount. The solution that Chugach is looking for on a going forward basis is really multifaceted. We issued an RFP at the fourth quarter of 2021 to see what was out there in the marketplace for renewable generation technologies or clean energy technologies. We received 9 responses from independent power producers, ranging from tidal to hydro to wind and solar and pumped hydro as well. From that, last year, we entered agreements to do further studies on a utility scale wind project and a utility scale solar project. And those studies are ongoing. We expect them to be completed within the next several months, at least for the current stage that we're looking at. In addition, I think it's really critical to recognize the importance of battery energy storage systems. We've talked about energy storage, how critical it is. That technology is evolving. We really need to move toward long duration energy storage that's going to help lay the foundation for integrating intermittent renewables, because that ideally with solar and wind, a challenge that the Railbelt utilities have is how do we integrate utility scale intermittent renewable resource into the system? That is, how do we firm those generation technologies up so that when it is dark and the wind's not blowing, we're able to provide power to you. In addition to that, from a carbon reduction perspective, we are working with Matanuska Electric Association. We've entered into a power pooling arrangement that's resulted in significant reductions in not only fuel cost, but in carbon emissions as well. In addition to that, we are studying, as Curtis mentioned, the Dixon Diversion Project, which will add additional water into the Bradley Lake Hydroelectric Project, which will be a significant benefit for decades to come. I'm talking about really the supply side of the equation, but we're also looking at decarbonization impacts on the customer side of the equation or the demand side of the equation. We've put in programs to incentivize heat pump technology in our service area, to incentivize electric vehicle charging infrastructure, to remove barriers to level 3 chargers by working with the other Railbelt utilities and the Regulatory Commission of Alaska to establish a tariff that removes penalties, if you want to quote unquote penalties associated with very low load factor energy usage. In addition to that, we have also adopted a program to provide beneficial electrification incentives for customers to switch to battery-operated tools and equipment. The way we look at beneficial electrification really is a win-win-win proposition. It's a win in that it lowers costs to consumers. It's a win in that it provides benefit through lower carbon emissions. And later this year, Chugach will be submitting a general rate case to the Regulatory Commission of Alaska with a proposal for time of use rates. That's critical as we go forward for beneficial electrification, because if we can have consumers charge their vehicles at night and we don't have to put any additional infrastructure in to meet the demands for electric vehicle charging during the evening hours, that ultimately means we have greater utilization of our assets. And the electric utility industry, by far, is an extremely capital-intensive industry, and the name of the game is to sell as much of the utilization of your assets that you possibly can. And this is a win because we're able to utilize our infrastructure on a more efficient basis, ultimately leading to lower electric rates for our members.
Gee, thank you very much. Julie.
Yeah, thanks. And Arthur covered a lot of the things that we're doing together as a group of utilities, a lot of the things that we're thinking about as well. You know, MEA, we're located kind of right in the center of the grid there. We have about 55,000 members, which, you know, I go down to the lower 48, there's, you know, concerts that are bigger than that, and that's like a, you know, a football game for some of you guys. So we don't have that many, we're not serving that many members up here, and we have about 4,700 miles of line. So that's a lot of infrastructure spread over very few people. So when you look at the opportunities, the capital opportunities that we have, you can see where John's had made a great point. It takes all of us working together to reach some of these economies of scale. And so we're really going all in on collaboration with the other utilities to try to get some of those larger projects in place. We're also working really closely to form a new organization with a large group of stakeholders called the Railbelt Reliability Council that will do joint planning and reliability standards. That allows more people to be part of this conversation and to do integrated resource planning. You know, MEA has a different load. We're almost all residential. We don't have a lot of base load industry or commercial. And so we also have a different power plant for that reason. And we have 10 smaller reciprocating engines that can more closely follow our load when we wake up in the morning, and then everybody drives into Anchorage and goes to work, and then they come home. And so our engines can follow that. Well, it's interesting because it's the same design of power plants that they're putting in all over the lower 48 and throughout the world to help regulate variable power, because it can follow loads, it can help regulate variable power. And so as we think about working together, we each have individual strengths and assets and locations. And so we're really working as part of a larger team to figure out how MEA can play a bigger role in that. Right now, MEA is about 15% renewable, primarily hydro. We do have the most small IPPs working with us. You know, we've really prioritized working with the private sector to bring in some of those ideas, some capital into the lower or into our grid. And so we have both run-of-river hydro, and we also have solar. And we've got the soon-to-be largest solar project with renewable IPP as the lead on that, as the owners. And so we have some great relationships being built. We're learning more and more about how to integrate variable power into our system, and we can only see that growing larger and larger. I think the other key thing that MEA is doing right now is looking within at the culture. I mean, we're not talking just about a technology transformation here. We're talking about a cultural transformation. You know, utilities have been around for decades, hundreds of years, doing the same thing in the very same way. And the people and the processes are built on that kind of stability. And so as we look forward towards this transition, we're also looking at our workforce. We're looking at our processes. We're doing a very deep dive into, do we have the people? Do they have the right processes to work with? Do they have the right equipment? You know, the utility industry is kind of famous for having people living or working there for a long time. We just lost a bunch of folks that have been there 30 and 40 years. So we're starting with a new workforce, which is a great opportunity, right? People thinking differently, people motivated by different things. But when we put them right in the middle of the same process, then we get the same result. And so one of the things we're very much focusing on is how do we create the culture and the processes and reinforce the behaviors that we want for transformational change that's going to be required through this energy transition. So there's a lot going on, and again, a lot of it is partnerships with the people in this room.
Thank you. Before I turn it over to John, you know, one thing that is interesting is AEA actually owns the transmission line from Willow to Healy, which connects to Golden Valley, which allows them to purchase power cheaper on the Railbelt and transmit it to Fairbanks. That was an investment by AEA, an investment by the state, and it actually saves the Fairbanks economy $40 million a year in their energy cost by being able to buy it on the Railbelt. So we're definitely interconnected, and of course that's how they receive their Bradley power, is through that transmission line connected onto their system. But John, please.
Curtis, thank you. Curtis emphasizes a very good point. It's because of the state investment in the infrastructure that we are able to achieve what we have achieved. The Bradley Lake, for example, the AEA, the Alaska Intertie. That we can't do that on the backs of the ratepayers, but we can over time with the state's assistance. And you know, the governor's here, and you know, my hat's off to the commitment that the governor has made to the future of energy within Alaska. You know, Curtis, you threw a softball to all of us, and it's an opportunity for all of us to brag. And you know, I'll try to keep my comments somewhat limited. You talked about what are the utilities doing on both on diversity generation and in carbon reduction. Much of what both Julie and Arthur said is what we at Golden Valley are also doing. What we're doing also, though, is somewhat, I mean, from our perspective, it really is transformative. And, you know, my hat's off to the board. In June of 2022, they adopted a strategic generation plan. And that plan consists of 3 planks. It's focused on carbon reduction, it's focused on and generation diversity. The first part, the first objective was to put additional emission reduction systems on our Healy Unit 1, and that's a 26 megawatt coal plant. It is our most reliable and one of our lowest cost units. So it made perfect sense. If we're focused on reliability and rates, it made perfect sense. The corollary to that, though, is we shut down, we're committed to strategically shut down Healy Unit 2 by December 31, 2024. Now, Healy Unit 2 is a 60 megawatt baseload unit. That's at least, you know, its production rate. It has proven to be one of our most unreliable and higher cost units. So it made sense to do it from that perspective. But in doing that, it also significantly reduces carbon emissions. The third component of the strategic generation plan was the integration of large-scale wind. And we just issued an RFP for up to 150 megawatts of wind. Our system in Golden Valley can't absorb it. Okay, it's critically dependent upon our ability to transmit the excess generation down to the South Central, and working with those that you see here, I think we'll be able to achieve it. The fourth is adding a large-scale, another battery energy storage system. At one time, Golden Valley had the largest battery in the world. Talk about being innovative. It's 18 years old and needs to be replaced, and so we are moving forward on that. And the fifth is, as we shut down Healy Unit 2, we have to have alternative energy. And the fifth component of that is bringing 30 to 50 megawatts of base load energy up from South Central. So it's a bold approach, and it's got many challenges. Not the least of which is making sure that we can bring that 30 to 50 megawatts up the intertie. We cannot, and I'm unequivocal in this and unabashed in saying we can't do it alone. Okay, our ability to achieve that is critically dependent on the partners that we see up here, as well as the state and the federal opportunities that are before us. But we are absolutely committed, not just Golden Valley, but everybody up here, to take advantage of those opportunities. And so we are not going to squander the opportunities to achieve real transformative change on the Railbelt. It's necessary and it's critical, and we owe it to the members on the Railbelt and to the state of Alaska as a whole.
All right, thank you. Carrie Ann, last word.
Thank you, Curtis, and thank you, John. One of the things that's really nice to be working for a member-owned cooperative is the stuff that we're working on, it really matters. Everything, all of the people that are here today that we're talking about the R&D and having good access to the governor's office and him cutting down some of the red tape, if we do this right, everything we're talking about is going to outlive everyone in this room. And what an exciting thing to be a part of. So at Homer Electric, I feel really proud to have the opportunity to work there, to work for the people that I work with, and to work with the leadership of the state and the stakeholders, many of whom are in this room. So for Homer Electric, we're a little bit different. We both have very small rural populations. We run an undersea cable across Kachemak Bay to Soldovia. So we power Soldovia, but we also power 3 native tribes over there as well. We're still dealing with a tree line. And if you want to know what a tree line is, it's exactly what it sounds like. We have distribution wire stapled to a tree. And that's how some of those villages are being powered. As somebody who is overseeing that's not a fun thing to be overseeing, because I'm the one who takes the phone calls when the power goes out, and I do pick up. So that one of our projects is really, rebuilding some of those transmission lines that we inherited when we purchased that system, but also using technology. The speakers that spoke right before us talked about one of the reasons why they are here and ready to invest in Alaska is the ability to have these kind of pilot programs, but also they're starting to see the difference in utilities. We're doing more with less, we're getting smarter, and we're changing. It's a really, really fun time to be a part of it. So one of the exciting projects that we just commissioned was our battery energy storage system. That was commissioned just at the beginning of 2022. We had a party on what was probably the coldest day, and so we all got to come into the power plant. That's a 46.5 megawatt system, and it's not only just helping Homer, though, it also helps provide spinning reserves, and it also regulates the system for everyone up and down the chain. So that's been very successful for us, and it allows us to proactively start looking at integrating significant non-firm generation into the system, and that was really important to us. So we have recognized for a long time that the time is now. We have a bunch of projects that we've been talking about, both ones that we would do with our partners up here on stage, but also stakeholders in the room. We're working with an IPP who has given us initial pricing that is below our existing COPA today. That's pretty exciting. We've not seen that before. So when you talk about really trying to lower prices, new technologies coming on, and then partnering with people that are doing that R&D, because usually utilities, we're not known for R&D, but we certainly do partner with them. You know, with ORPC, who I know is here as well, we've been talking to ORPC since 2011. You know, we have the biggest tides, second to the Bay of Fundy in the world. I mean, when that technology comes on and allows us to be integrated in there, that's going to be a very exciting thing for all of us. You know, in the short term, we're looking at significant solar and wind projects, and then we're also talking to some folks about geothermal across the bay. You know, and one of the things that I think is really interesting is we are all committed to trying to produce reliable, redundant power at the lowest price. And we do that in a bunch of different ways. One of the ways is working together in economy of scales, but also in Alaska, things are just a tiny bit different, and we have to be more clever. So I don't know if anyone's heard of INN. It's a very small utility across, just by Igiugig, across the bay. So they came to us a while back and said, we are really struggling getting poles. We have to pay $5,000 per pole to get it over here. Is there any way we could work with you guys so we could get the poles cheaper? So my boss, Brad, said, sure, no problem. So we now, every year, when we go to order our poles, we will put in an order from them, and we got their prices down to $1,500 delivered. And we're also getting good seafood now delivered to us as a thank you. So there's just these kind of things that as you look to, how do we work together? How do we capitalize on technology? How do we change too, so that we are listening to our stakeholders, listening to the leadership of Curtis, listening to the leadership of the state and the governor, and we can integrate this, because really the time is now, and we need to do this right. And if we do, everything we're talking about is going to outlive us, and I know that's how I want to spend the back half of my career.
All right, thank you. We do have a couple of questions, and we also are quickly running out of time. So if you don't mind, I'd like to turn it to John. And one of our questions we have is, we've heard that all that's happening with the utilities, but and what are the utilities, why are they not moving fast enough? And how would you respond to that in moving into new power and new generation?
Thanks a lot, Curtis. Put me on the spot, huh? You know, let me just say that fast enough is you know, it's a matter of perspective. We have a fiduciary obligation, you know, that I talked about. We want to make sure that we do it deliberately and intelligently. In the end, our ratepayers have to pay it. And so we've got to make sure that we're not profligate in spending. What I will tell you, though, and you know, I've been with the Railbelt now first as in-house counsel for about 5 years, and most recently as CEO for the last 3+. I can tell you that the collaboration and the coordination that hopefully you see here on the Railbelt, it's never been to this degree. We are making significant improvements, and we will continue to do so. I think there's a lot of good news that will come forward. Hopefully, we'll ink an RFP, you know, a deal on large-scale wind energy that will be transmitted up and down the Railbelt. The transmission commitment that you just talked about, that's underway. I mean, you know, we're working on that right now. We need you know, assistance from federal funding and state funding, but we're committed to achieving that. So all of this stuff is coalescing, and I'm very optimistic. You know, I hope not Pollyannish, but I'm very optimistic that the future is incredibly bright for certainly the Railbelt and the state of Alaska as a whole, because the success of the Railbelt also ensures success for rural villages through the power cost equalization program. So you know we serve 75% of the state. So to the extent that we can lower the cost of energy on the Railbelt, it helps the state as a whole.
All right, thank you. Arthur, just a couple of minutes, or just a short time on that, but just kind of add another question that came in on why we're not moving fast enough. But another question that kind of dovetails into this is, why is there not additional exploration in Cook Inlet for natural gas?
Well, if there are opportunities for Cook Inlet natural gas, well, there are opportunities that are out there. The question is, at what cost, and what's the timeline of integrating that gas into the system? In addition to that, I think I want to go back in a little bit in history. we've been here before, approximately 10 years ago, when there was limitations on the gas supply in Cook Inlet, and before that, there were other times where we were limited in that on gas supply as well in the Cook Inlet. And I think where we are, we need a permanent solution. We do not want to be here 10 years from now saying we're short on gas, we need to scramble and find alternative sources. We need a permanent solution. And that permanent solution really is a combination of getting additional gas, whether from LNG, the North Slope, but also a combination of integrating clean energy into our system as we transition to the future. We have significant capital investment as electric utilities. We are very capital intensive. We can't walk away from our investment that we have in our books today without incurring significant write-offs or questions of having the ability to recover those costs. So we need a methodical transition to a clean energy environment, and in that process to reduce and significantly reduce our reliance on natural gas, really for long-term viability as electric utilities.
Thank you very much. I think in closing, I'd just like to make a few remarks, and one being, 5 years ago, I don't think you would see AEA and the utilities on the same stage together. It's been quite a change in the last 5 years, and it's due to the commitment of the utilities and the people on the stage to make the difference that we're trying to do. We realize that we're all in this thing together. We are all a connected grid, and not all the answers are going to be held within one jurisdiction or within one service territory. And I think that's important to note. AEA, there was a time that we kind of measured success by how many months we weren't suing each other. It's safe to say I think we're 49 months into not suing each other in various issues within the Railbelt. But we bought the SSQ line. AEA bought the SSQ line, which is a Sedona, Sterling, Quartz Creek. When there was a fire and that line was down, it was a Homer asset, but it benefited the northern utilities. And there were issues surrounding getting that up and running. And with the agreement of the utilities, AEA stepped in, they purchased it, and those are some of the upgrades that we're doing now. And so with that, I just want to thank the panelists here today, because I think we are, like I said, we're all in this. We meet on a regular basis. We have a plan. We don't always agree, and we have those frank discussions. But now we're having them behind closed doors, and then coming out with a united front on what we need to do as a whole. And really, with the governor's leadership, with the legislature leadership, in helping us with that, with Dixon diversion, and those opportunities that we've identified, is making a world of difference. And with that, it's owed a lot, especially to the governor, to the legislature, and to the panelists here. And I just want to thank the panelists for being here. I want to thank all the utilities for working together to try to find out what that solution is and what lever we need to pull. And with that, thank you very much.